be a pirate. I want to sail the seven seas, yeah, I want to be a pirate. I want to do just...
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about the Eurozone and the financial collapse there. I guess they're making book over there whether Italy or Spain is going to leave the Eurozone first. And it really doesn't matter. They're just sort of going back. And the reason that these countries are going to have to leave the Eurozone could be Spain, could be Greece, if the IMF is pulling the plug. It's because the country no longer has the money to finance their continuing operations, and as long as they're locked into the common currency, they're trapped by that private central bank that by design creates more debt than it creates money with which to pay the debt. So the only way to survive is to cut loose, go back to being an independent nation, and run your own economy for the betterment of your own nation instead of some globalist, fascist financial fantasy that's out there. Give you the ability to, if necessary, devalue your currency in order to bring outside investment back in and revive your economy. And it's only a matter of time before it happens. It's only a matter of time. And when it does, when the first nation that leaves the Eurozone, whether it's Greece or Spain or Italy or who knows, all those investors who bought those credit default swaps against Europe's debt will see the departure of these nations as defaulting because they can't pay their debt. And they're going to show up on Wall Street, which recklessly sold these credit default swaps without maintaining cash reserves to pay claims. And these investors are going to demand payment. And because Wall Street, like AIG, did not keep cash reserves to cover claims, they're not prepared to pay. Which may explain why there are barricades built right into the sidewalks in Wall Street. When I was there last September for the 9/11 anniversary, and I was walking around Wall Street because, just wanted to sort of tour, the center of evil in the United States of America and stick my finger in the nose of that bull. And I noticed the big, huge metal barricades to block off Wall Street and protect it from rioting. They're built in to the sidewalks. It's not temporary. They don't bring them out from a truck. They're literally in the sidewalk. Push a button, boom, the walls go up. And I guess now we know why. Meanwhile, Tony Blair is out there saying, don't hang the bankers, which lets us know that that's exactly what we're thinking about. And I'm in agreement with Tony Blair. Let's not hang the bankers. It's too good for them. Let's hang, draw, and quarter them. Burn the bodies and have a dog pee on the ashes. That's a beginning right there. Now, the Special Inspector General in charge of the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, the bank bailouts, otherwise known as the Congressional Investment Relief Act, wrote an editorial for Bloomberg saying Americans should lose faith in their government. They should deplore the captured politicians and regulators who distributed tax dollars to the banks without insisting they be accountable. The American people should be revolted by a financial system that rewards failure and protects those who drove it to the point of collapse and will undoubtedly do so again. Only with this appropriate and justified rage can we hope for the type of reform that will one day break our system free from the corrupting grasp of the megabanks, which is another word for the money junkies. So even the guy overseeing TARP was saying the system is totally screwed up. It's rigged against you. Government and financial corporations are aligned against the ordinary people. That is the classic definition of a fascist government. Now, financial writers are coming forward to say that after its complete discrediting by the rigging, that the LIBOR has to go. It has to go, and of course, its demise is going to trigger a great deal of confusion and chaos in the financial markets because they need that benchmark. They need to agree on a new benchmark, and the challenge is going to be getting everybody to agree on what that benchmark should be and how it should be calculated. I disagree. The real challenge will be getting banks and investors and borrowers to agree not to screw around with the new benchmark as they did the old. See, that's the problem. The financial corporations are going to rig everything they can get away with rigging. In the face of a government that looks the other way, a new benchmark is not going to solve the problem. They'll just rig that one. So we need to hang, draw, and quarter the CEOs, the top management, not some low-level clerk who's going to be thrown into the fire to appease the masses. Send him into the arena to be torn apart by a lion so the masses will say, yes, Caesar loves us, and we'll go home. We need to put the CEOs of the financial corporations that rig the LIBOR into jail. And here is why we should. Corporations will protect their officials against normal vicissitudes of economic fate. If you're a CEO in a corporation and your corporation goes out of business and hideously into debt because of the normal course of business, because somebody else comes out with a better product, your personal wealth is protected by the corporation. That's the advantage of having a corporation. You know, your home, your car will not be attached to pay off the debts of the corporation. But that's only if the corporation was in compliance with the law. If you are committing criminal activity, you are not protected. Those CEOs of those financial institutions that were rigging the LIBOR should be in jail. It is criminal felony fraud. It is price fixing. They need to go to jail. They need to wear the orange jumpsuits. They need to be sharing a cell with some big burly guy who lost his motorcycle repair shop when the LIBOR went the wrong way. That's justice. Now, Ellen Brown is basically out there forecasting that the too big to fail banks may have hit their Titanic iceberg. They're called the LIBOR. Because whatever sweet little bailout deal the government does, whatever the Department of Justice decides to do with the LIBOR executives, they'll probably let them walk the way they did that human trafficking ring. You know, because we can't guarantee a prosecution, even with 3 guilty pleas. We're just going to have to let them go. They'll do exactly the same thing to the money junkies on Wall Street. But the civil lawsuits are piling up. And there is nothing in the Constitution of the United States of America that allows the federal government to come in and block a civil litigation against the money junkies. And the lawyers, they're already into a feeding frenzy. They're biting the fins off of each other, trying to get to the head of this thing. Now, a report just came out, federal report, admitting that the 7 largest U.S. banks have created thousands of subsidiaries, 14,000 subsidiaries just since 1991 that are basically used to skirt regulations and taxes. That's the only reason they exist. These companies exist only on paper and a post box. And they move money around and they shuffle it around to keep things so complicated and obfuscated that nobody can find out how much tax they really own. And as a result, these financial corporations that have become billionaires at the expense of the American people are paying hardly any taxes at all, or in some cases, they're not paying any taxes, period, end of discussion. Billions and trillions of dollars pouring into these banks that are not paying any taxes through this game playing. And the U.S. government looks the other way, throws up its hands and saying, we can't sort out this mess. To heck with it, you know. Another little way the money junkies are having a problem, or rather giving us a problem. If you have traveled recently by air, and my wife and I just did when we went to Cincinnati for the World Choir Games, on your ticket, there's a little thing called the fuel surcharge. In other words, there's this little added item where you're billed separately for the amount of fuel it's going to cost to take you where you're going. And it's a way of the ticket prices going up and down, and the airlines say it's not us, it's the fuel cost. Well, a study by Carson Wagonlit Travel has shown that fuel surcharges by U.S. airlines have gone up 53% in the last year, while the fuel prices for the jet fuel have only increased 24%. So they're gouging you again and blaming it on the fuel prices. Out here in Hawaii, our electric bill, I mean, we've cut our electric usage way, way down. We've gone to all, LED lights. We're not even using the CFCs anymore. No more cathode ray tubes. It's all high efficiency this and high efficiency that. And on the little monthly usage chart, it shows our electric usage is declining, and yet the bill keeps going up higher and higher. Why? Oh, it's that fuel surcharge. It's just looting the people under any excuse. Another bad economic indicator, Cisco is laying off 1,300 employees in their latest cutback, about 2% of their entire working force being laid off here. The U.S. Census data is the worst in the last half century. 100 million Americans in the United States are living in poverty. 100 million, 30%. Now, there's this little chart that somebody put up, world median worth. In other words, looking at various nations around the world, the average citizen of those countries, what is their net worth in real wealth? And following along the line of that newsroom screed about how America isn't the greatest nation on earth any longer, this chart is worth looking at, because the U.S. median worth is not at the top of the list. It's not even second. It's not even third. It's all the way down there, almost at the very bottom. The United States of America, average citizens' median worth is lower than Germany, Taiwan, Israel, the Dutch, New Zealand, Spain, Finland, Norway, Canada, France, Ireland, Switzerland, Great Britain, Japan, Italy, and Australia, with Australia topping the list. The only countries on this survey we beat out were Sweden and Denmark. And most of that decline in our median worth is over the last 3 years. 40% of your net worth got sucked into the Wall Street money junkies, scams, and frauds. 33% of American colleges are on an unsustainable financial path, which is a euphemism for they're going to go out of business. Even with the high cost of education and certainly the high cost of student loans, or maybe because of it, fewer and fewer people are going to school. And there's certainly less and less government financial support for schools because they want you to have to borrow money to go to school. And now 1/3 of our colleges are heading to shutting down for financial reasons. We're going to grab a phone call. Dan in Texas. Aloha. Dan, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Your statement earlier regarding there being nothing to prevent the people from suing these folks civilly.
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in the mortgage scandals in which all this criminal fraud was committed, I know the government passed legislation that retroactively made it not criminal. But did they not also block the civil suits?
No, they didn't. They're trying to. They're trying to get everybody to settle quietly out of court because the goal of the policy set in 2008 was to not allow the American financial system as a whole to suffer damage to its credibility and trustworthiness in the eyes of the world. It didn't work, but that was the policy. But there are civil suits that are taking place against all of these banks that use the mortgage electronic registration system. They're being hit with tax avoidance cases. A lot of those got headed off by Obama's foreclosure settlement. But private civil suits, are starting to work their way through the court system. And, they're hoping that the judges will simply rule from the bench that you can't sue the mortgage companies. But in basis, the federal government does not have the legal authority to stop a civil lawsuit. They can intervene criminally. They can say, we've decided we don't want these people to be arrested and go to jail. They can do that legally, but they can't go in and say, you can't sue your neighbor because he hit your car and wrecked it. They can't do that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right. Which is not to say that political pressure won't be brought to bear to try and keep these lawsuits minimum, and certainly the media is not going to report that. Might give other people who got their homes taken fraudulently bad ideas of going out and suing their banks, and we can't do that. We have to protect those bankers, those poor hard-working bankers. They've had so much trouble, we have to feel sorry for them. Oh, my goodness, those bankers. All the anti-Semites hate them, or whatever it is they're going to use here. By the way, speaking of protecting the bankers, you're going to love this one. Over in Great Britain, one of their ministers of government there, not religious minister, government minister, David Gork, claimed that paying cash is morally wrong. Says anybody who is paying their local tradespeople with cash, they're as bad as tax avoiders. Because the government can't keep an eye on what they're spending. And more to the point, if you're using plastic to pay your bills, the banks get a piece of the action. And they're trying to sell the same thing here. I mean, for the people who can't actually qualify for a credit card, they have the prepaid card. In other words, you'll go and you'll give the bank $100 and they'll give you a card with $100 on it, less a handling fee. Why not just keep the $100 and pay cash? Oh, no, because cash is bad. We equate cash with terrorism and drug dealing and underhanded behavior. You must have all your financial transactions go through the bankers so that they can get a penny every time you buy a newspaper or a nickel every time you take your wife out to, for an ice cream. Got to have a piece of the action. Like the mafia, we get a piece of the action. Everything you do, you're not allowed to do anything. We get a piece of the action. That's the new model of the banking enterprises. Because, those poor bankers, they can't screw us anymore because of the LIBOR. They have to find another way to take money from us. And so now they're trying to say that if you pay cash, you are morally evil and wrong and on the same level as terrorists and drug dealers. Talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. But there's an even more extreme, not to mention lame, claim being put out there to try and keep this global fascist dictatorship going a little bit longer. They're now saying that if the European Union falls, a new Hitler will come to power. This is from Jeffrey Roberts. He's saying, this rise of this idea of nationalism in Europe, that's a warning sign that the Nazis are coming back and we'll have Hitler and Auschwitz and all this stuff. We've got to prop up the European Central Bank by any means necessary. This one just pegged the lame-o meter. We're going to take a break for commercials. I'll elucidate further when we come back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And so we're talking about this Jeffrey Roberts, who's putting out this idea that unless we're all willing to throw what is left of our wealth at the European Central Bank to preserve the European Union, that Hitler will rise from the grave and stride across the world doing Hitler stuff. Of all the excuses given by the globalist banking cartel as to why we should allow them to perpetuate their corrupt predations upon the populace, this one has to rank as the lamest of all. In fact, it's an Olympic gold medal in lame. Basically, Jeffrey is saying, yeah, we forced a Ponzi scheme banking system on you, but if you don't let us get away with it, Hitler is going to get you. Now, Europe is not being nationalist. They are being regionalist. They want a restoration of the national borders, which protected them from financial fraud perpetrated in foreign banking centers. Fraud like the Wall Street's mortgage-backed securities fraud, the rigging of LIBOR. It is not a bad thing to want to erect walls around your own country to protect it. In the eyes of the globalists, of course, this is a bad thing. The idea was they realized they couldn't bring a global government into existence all at the same time. So they were going to do it in steps. There was going to be the European Union, and then there was going to be the North American Union. And after they had 5 or 6 unions, they'd merge them all together so that nobody would realize we now had a global government. Of course, the problem is they got greedy. As soon as they built these unions, the first thing they did was shackle them to another private central bank, issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. And that's why the European Union is falling apart. And all the money junkies' horses and all the money junkies' men aren't going to be able to put it back together again. So now they're waving Nazis at us if we don't go along with their scams any longer. Going to grab a phone call here. Rod, and I don't have a location you're calling from. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Rod, this is Rod from Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Okay. Aloha, Nui Nui.
Hey, it's funny because here in Brazil we have a brand, a name brand that says Pacalolo. And I had no idea what that meant.
It's the Hawaiian word for the illegal smokables.
Yeah, that's funny. Anyways, I just want to make a comment that I think is a suggestion for you guys. Why don't you just petition your Congress people, whatever, your president, to change the name of the United States of America to United States of Israel, and wipe out all those little stars that you have in your flag, and put in a big old 6-pointed star over there. And I think you'll be better. You'll be better off because at least you have the health care. You have decent lifestyle.
Oh, no. Wait a minute. You got to look a little more carefully at Israel, because in Israel, only certain people have adequate health care and a decent lifestyle, and everybody else is on the other side of the wall. You know, we're already doing that in the United States. That's why DHS is handing out all the grants, mostly to Jewish organizations. We're already there at that two-tiered society. We'll be back after station identification.
Because you can handle the truth.
Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Revero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call. Patrick in England. Aloha, Patrick. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Hi, Mike. I was just thinking you were mentioning the MP, David Gork. It's funny because that subject was being talked about on local chat show radio this morning, and the absurdity of of different situations. You've got someone coming to do your gardening, and you pay by credit card or check. But we had people phoning in, people like plumbers, and he was saying, look, if I take a check from this customer, you see that over here in the UK, it's much more relaxed. Someone can dishonor a check, and you can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. Over in the US, it's a criminal matter, and they can be pursued. But over here, you have to wait for a check to clear. And the plumbers were saying, look, if a guy pays me cash, I could still put it through my books, but I've got the money straight away. I can use it to go and get the parts for the job. Or the builder, he's building a construction. They've got to go to the builders merchants. They got the money straight away. Insisting it all goes through the banks and credit cards and whatever. It's just absurd. Mr. Gork was being talked about. I assume probably up and down the country this morning, a local chat radio of his absurd remarks coming at a time when the appetite for bankers are at the lowest possible ebb. So it's just absurd, yes.
It absolutely was absurd. I mean, in addition to basically, giving the bankers yet another stream of revenue without the permission of the people, it's all about the fact that tradesmen who are paid, small fees for small services, there's no way for the government to know if they're reporting all their income. And this is just about trying to guarantee that the government will know how much money you're making because they will have access to your bank transactions. I know here in the United States, the big push is on for this little credit card reader that goes right on your smartphone, and you can accept credit cards for all your payments. And at this particular point, the bankers, the sentiment of the bankers is the same thing. We want to get away from the bankers. We want to pull back. We want to go to a cash-only society where we know what money we've got, we know it's going to hold its value, and we can choose to spend it wherever we want, and nobody's looking over our shoulder. And it's like I was commenting when we were in Cincinnati the other week. I mean, when USA Airways literally had people stepping in front of you as you're trying to make your flight, and they're saying, do you want to sign up for a credit card? We'll give you a free round trip anywhere and everything. At the moment you use the credit, and they're literally blocking you. And I'm like, say, I'm late, your flight in from Detroit was late. I need to get on my next plane. Can you get out of my way? And they say, just take this and fill it in. And they're just, it's a panic to try and get people back into the banks. I hate the bankers at this point. I'm trying to find out some way that we can live our life without the bankers, because life was a lot simpler without the bankers and all the paperwork and the forms, this and whatnot. And, it's like the same thing I tell to the entertainment corporation about all their digital rights management and Blu-ray and the rest of this thing. If you want us to use your system, you have to make it easy for us to go along with. But if you demand that we do this and that, and then you just load it up with all kinds of gratuitous paperwork, we're going to rebel against that, because our lives have more value than to be free, unpaid clerical help for the banking system.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, obviously, the government obviously fears us, developing our own sort of barter system, as well in the future. And, of course, the absurdity of having taxi drivers and things that are a total cash business, obviously requiring them no longer to take cash. We've got to have a record of that transaction that you paid for. And what our IRS over here have got, or in the Revenue and Customs, they have a model for every type of business, and they work out, we know roughly how much your sort of business makes, and therefore how much you must have coming through your books roughly, and therefore we know how much to tax you from, and you prove that you haven't, otherwise we're self-assessed you on that amount and tax you on it, and it's up to you to prove that you didn't take that.
It's a return to the Napoleonic Code. You're guilty until you can prove you're innocent. We have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.